Judith, we want to talk about a transition strategy. It just isn't functioning anymore. The comments were apparent and hard to ignore, hanging in the conference room like a foul odor. When we first moved into these offices 8 years ago, I sat at the head of the table that I had personally chosen. I clutched my coffee mug, the one bearing our initial logo, and my knuckles became white. After being washed hundreds of times, my design has faded. Judith Monroe is my name. I co-founded Brightwave Creative in Madison, Wisconsin, with 2 college buddies 15 years ago, and I am currently 58 years old. In a repurposed storage space above a coffee shop, we had begun with 3 workstations and a printer. With 36 staff and clientele throughout the Midwest, we now filled the whole 6th story of a downtown skyscraper. In other words, I had constructed it. Thomas departed to teach at the university 3 years after Frank retired 5 years ago. Bringing in younger partners like Olivia Harmon and Cameron Vance, I had stayed. I had taught them all they knew about strategic marketing, shared client contacts that I had developed over the course of 10 years, and served as their mentor. They were sitting across from me now, their faces displaying a mixture of badly concealed frustration and practiced pity. Olivia's freshly styled hair fell flawlessly as she cocked her head with practiced worry, while Cameron's pricey watch glinted as he fidgeted. Cameron went on to say, "The industry is changing rapidly," in a polished tone. "We need to present a more contemporary image." Contemporary. I said it again. On my tongue, the word tasted unpleasant. Exactly, Olivia said, seeming almost relieved that I had figured it out so fast. More up-to-date, younger, and more sensitive to the tastes of digital natives and new trends. Prior to any of them receiving their undergraduate degrees, I had spearheaded our company's foray into digital marketing. When Cameron was still sharing party photographs on Facebook, I had already acquired our largest customer, the Harrington account. Last year, we took home 3 industry awards for the legacy-forward advertising approach that I created. However, I had aged, which is the greatest sin in advertising. My eyelines had gotten deeper. I used to have chestnut brown hair, but now it was silver gray, trimmed tastefully but definitely gray. Every year of hard labor was evident in my hands, which had planned hundreds of campaigns, written thousands of pitches, and shaken the palms of innumerable clients. Cameron handed a document across the table and stated, "We're ready to offer you a buyout package. We think it's quite generous." Without altering my face, I opened it. Their offer was just around 1/3 of the true value of my stock holding. I could see the lake in the distance from the conference room windows, where we had held a business sailing day only the previous summer. When I said, "This is our best quarter ever," I recalled how everyone cheered. I was surprised to see a preview of their new branding mock-up on Olivia's iPad when I opened the folder. Without me, they had already begun to revamp the company's image. "I'll need time to review this," I said, rising from my chair with as much dignity as I could muster. "Of course," Olivia replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "Take the weekend." I nodded and walked out, feeling their relief at my back, relieved I hadn't made a scene, relieved I hadn't cried, relieved they were one step closer to erasing my existence from the company I had built. As I drove home that evening, memories flooded back of all I'd sacrificed for Brightwave. The vacations cut short, the weekends spent working, the dates I'd canceled, my marriage that had ended partly because Gregory couldn't understand my dedication to growing the business. "You're building something beautiful," he'd said during our last real conversation. "But you've stopped building us." He'd been right. I'd chosen the company, and now the company was choosing not to have me. My house felt particularly empty that night. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and stepped out onto my back porch, staring at the garden I never had enough time to properly tend. The irony wasn't lost on me, all the hours I'd given to Brightwave, and now I'd have nothing but time. I didn't sleep. Instead, I found myself in my home office at 3 a.m., pulling out files, reviewing contracts, and examining the legal documents I'd signed over the years. By dawn, I'd made several important discoveries. First, I still personally owned the trademark to Authentic Legacy Forward Thinking, our most successful campaign slogan, which we'd begun using as our agency tagline. I'd registered it under my name 2 years ago when I'd first noticed Cameron and Olivia huddled together too often, speaking in whispers that stopped when I approached. Second, our 4 largest clients, Harrington Financial, Westfield Manufacturing, Crescent Healthcare, and Northern Outfitters, had clauses in their contracts that required notification if the agency underwent significant management changes. These were relationships I'd built personally over many years. The contracts even named me specifically as their account lead. Third, I'd never signed a non-compete agreement. In our early days, we'd been too busy building the business to worry about such technicalities. And later, well, I suppose no one had imagined I'd ever leave. The sun was rising as I made coffee, my mind surprisingly clear. I remembered something my grandmother used to say: sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away with grace and then build something better. I thought about fighting. I could hire lawyers, threaten litigation, make things messy and public. I could force them to pay me what my stake was truly worth. But that would be giving them more of my precious time and energy, and they'd already taken enough. Instead, I did something that would later confuse Cameron and Olivia greatly. I signed their lowball offer without negotiation. I cleaned out my office over the weekend when no one was there. I sent a brief, professional email to the staff announcing my departure, thanking them for their contributions. And on Monday morning, when Cameron and Olivia expected protests or tears, I handed over the signed paperwork, shook their hands, and said with perfect sincerity, "I truly wish you the best." The look of confusion on their faces was small, but it was my first victory. "You did what?" My sister Eleanor nearly shouted into the phone. "Judith, they completely undervalued your stake. You built that company." I held the phone away from my ear as I watered the hanging basket on my porch. 3 weeks had passed since I'd walked out of Brightwave for the last time, and already my garden was looking better. I'd slept more in those 3 weeks than I had in the previous 3 months. "I know exactly what I built, Ellie," I replied, keeping my voice even. "And I know exactly what it's worth." "Then why?" "Because fighting would have meant staying in their story," I explained. "I'm more interested in writing my own." After another 15 minutes of trying to convince my sister I hadn't lost my mind, I ended the call and checked my email. There was a message from Harold Westfield, CEO of Westfield Manufacturing and one of Brightwave's oldest clients. "Judith, I was surprised to hear about your departure. The young woman they've assigned to our account seems knowledgeable, but I'd prefer to discuss our upcoming rebrand with someone who understands our company history. Are you consulting independently now? If so, I'd like to meet." I smiled. Harold's message was the 3rd such inquiry I'd received this week. I hadn't reached out to any of them. I didn't need to. Word travels fast in Madison's business community. That afternoon, I met with Patricia Kingston, my attorney, to finalize the paperwork for my new venture, Silverline Strategies. "I like it," Patricia said, looking over the documents. "Subtle but pointed." "I thought so," I replied. "And you're clear on the operational boundaries? No direct solicitation of Brightwave clients, as agreed in your separation terms." I nodded. "I won't need to solicit. They're already calling me." Patricia smiled. She was about my age and had faced her own battles in a male-dominated legal world. "Just be careful. Your former partners struck me as the type who bruise easily when their plans don't unfold exactly as expected." "They'll be fine," I said. "They wanted youth and energy, and that's what they have. Whether that's what their clients want is another matter entirely." As I drove home, I passed the Brightwave offices. Through the large windows, I could see Cameron leading a meeting, gesturing enthusiastically. They'd already removed the signage with our original logo and replaced it with something more contemporary, all lowercase letters and a gradient color scheme that would look outdated in 18 months. They'd also started using my tagline, Authentic Legacy Forward Thinking, in all their new marketing materials. I wondered if they bothered to check who actually owned it. My phone rang through my car speaker. It was Harold Westfield again. Judith, I've been thinking. Rather than just consulting on the rebrand, would you consider taking over our entire marketing strategy? The presentation your replacement sent over this morning was, well, let's just say it showed a fundamental misunderstanding of our company values. I smiled as I pulled into my driveway. I'd be happy to discuss that, Harold. Why don't you come by my new office tomorrow? There's something called Silverline Strategies I'd like to tell you about. My new office space was intentionally different from Brightwave's sleek, open-concept design. I'd leased a converted Victorian house on Madison's east side with hardwood floors, large windows, and a wraparound porch where clients could sit with coffee and discuss their marketing needs in comfortable wicker chairs. The walls displayed framed examples of my most successful campaigns over the years, many of which had won awards for Brightwave. Within 6 weeks, I'd hired 4 staff members, 2 experienced designers who had previously freelanced for me, a brilliant content strategist who'd been overlooked for promotion at a larger agency, and an office manager who kept everything running smoothly. We were small but efficient, focusing exclusively on high-value clients who appreciated strategic thinking over flashy trends. I was reviewing our quarterly projections when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, a junior designer who still worked at Brightwave. We occasionally met for coffee, as I'd mentored her since she first joined the company as an intern. Did you know they're using your tagline for the Belmont Hotel's pitch? The one about authentic legacy. Olivia's presenting it as the centerpiece of the campaign tomorrow. I set my phone down, unsurprised but still disappointed. I'd been waiting to see how far they would go. Now I knew. Dorothy, I called to my office manager, would you ask Patricia to send that cease and desist letter we prepared? It's time. Right away, she replied with a knowing smile. That afternoon, I met with Harold Westfield and the Westfield Manufacturing Executive Team to present Silverline's comprehensive strategy for their product launch. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment before Harold spoke. This is exactly what we've been trying to articulate for months, he said. You've captured our company's heritage while positioning us for the future. That's what experience brings, I replied. Understanding that innovation doesn't mean abandoning what made you successful in the first place. As we were wrapping up, Harold looked somewhat uncomfortable. I should mention, Cameron from Brightwave has been calling me daily. Rather persistent, young man. That's to be expected, I said evenly. You're an important client. Harold shook his head. We've already notified them that we're terminating our contract. I just thought you should know, they're not taking it well. Cameron implied that you might have violated some agreement by working with us. I smiled. I assure you, everything I'm doing is completely above board, but I appreciate the heads up. When I returned to the office, Dorothy met me at the door, her expression serious. Cameron Vance is here. He's quite agitated. I found Cameron pacing in our small conference room, his perfectly tailored suit looking somewhat wilted after what had clearly been a stressful day. When he saw me, his face flushed. This is how you repay us, he demanded without preamble. Sealing our clients? I haven't stolen anyone, Cameron, I replied calmly. Clients make their own decisions about which agencies best serve their needs. West Manufacturing was with Brightwave for 12 years. No, I corrected him. Westfield was with me for 12 years. There's a difference, which you're now discovering. He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. And Harrington Financial is reviewing their options. And Crescent Healthcare hasn't returned our calls in 2 weeks. This isn't coincidence. Perhaps they're not responding to your new contemporary approach, I suggested. Cameron's eyes narrowed. We were trying to do the right thing, Judith. The industry is changing. Clients want fresh perspectives. Digital natives. Apparently not all clients, I interrupted. Some still value experience, strategic thinking, and long-standing relationships. I gestured to the chair across from me. Now, was there something specific you wanted to discuss? I have a rather full afternoon. He remained standing. We want you to stop using Brightwave in your credentials. Stop mentioning that you founded our company when you pitched to clients. I couldn't help but laugh. You want me to erase 15 years of my professional life because it's inconvenient for you? That's not how reality works, Cameron. We'll take legal action, if necessary, he threatened. I look forward to that discussion, I replied. Especially when your lawyer explains how you're using my trademark tagline without permission. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? Check your inbox, I said. Your counsel should have received our cease and desist letter about 20 minutes ago. The following weeks brought developments that Cameron and Olivia likely never anticipated when they orchestrated my departure. First, Harrington Financial, which represented nearly 30% of Brightwave's annual revenue, officially terminated their contract and signed with Silverline. Their CEO, Victoria Harrington, made a point of calling me personally. That young woman they sent to our last meeting tried to explain to my board why we need to appeal to millennials, she said with a laugh. We're a wealth management firm specializing in retirement planning, Judith. Our primary clients are 55 to 70 years old with portfolios over $2 million. Next, Northern Outfitters followed, their marketing director explaining they needed an agency that understood their traditional customer base while helping them expand thoughtfully. Then Crescent Healthcare signed a 2-year exclusive contract with Silverline. By the end of the 3rd month, 7 of Brightwave's established clients had made the switch. I took no particular joy in these developments. These were relationships I'd built over years, clients whose businesses I understood intimately. I was simply continuing to serve them now under my own banner. What did bring me satisfaction, however, was building something authentic to my values. Silverline operated differently from most agencies. We limited our client roster to ensure personal attention. We hired based on talent and fit, not age or trendiness. Our team ranged from 24 to 67 years old, each bringing different perspectives and strengths. One Tuesday morning, Patricia called with news. Brightwave's attorneys responded to our cease and desist, she said. They're claiming the tagline was created as work for hire under company ownership. They can claim whatever they want, I replied. I have the trademark registration and documentation showing I created it before bringing it to the company. They're also threatening to countersue for client interference. I sighed. Are they really prepared to argue in open court that their clients left because I interfered, rather than because they pushed out the person those clients trusted? That wouldn't be a good look for an agency that's supposed to understand client relationships. Patricia chuckled. That's essentially what I told them in more legal language. I think they'll back down on that front, but they're digging in on the tagline. Apparently, they've already built their new branding around it. That was short-sighted of them, I noted. Keep me posted. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Olivia Harmon arrived without an appointment, looking considerably less polished than when I'd last seen her at Brightwave. The confidence she displayed when ousting me had been replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Do you have a moment? She asked, hovering in the doorway of my office. I gestured to the chair across from me. Of course, she sat, fidgeting with her watch. I wanted to speak with you directly, away from lawyers and Cameron. I'm listening. We're struggling, she admitted bluntly. The client departures hit our projections hard. The remaining clients are nervous, and we're not landing new accounts at the rate we anticipated. That must be challenging, I said neutrally. We're also overextended on the office lease and the new hires we brought in after you left, she continued. Cameron thought we could just replace your client relationships with new business. I didn't point out the flaws in that logic. From her expression, she'd already identified them herself. What exactly are you here for, Olivia? I asked. I'm here to see if there's a path forward that doesn't end with both agencies damaged. Maybe a collaboration or a referral arrangement. She trailed off, perhaps hearing how unlikely her proposal sounded. I'm not interested in rescuing Brightwave, I said calmly. You and Cameron made a calculated decision to remove me because you thought my age was a liability. Now you're living with the consequences of that miscalculation. Olivia's composure cracked. We never meant to. To get caught? I finished for her. Or to discover that experience actually has value in a service business built on client relationships? She stared at her hands. Silent, I wish you luck, Olivia. I truly do. But Silverline and Brightwave will continue on separate paths. The legal dispute over the tagline was settled quickly once Brightwave's attorneys reviewed my documentation. They had no choice but to acknowledge my ownership and cease using authentic legacy forward thinking in any of their materials. This required them to pull their new website, redesign their business cards and proposal templates, and essentially start their rebranding from scratch. The costs, both financial and in market credibility, were substantial. Meanwhile, Silverline continued to grow strategically. We weren't trying to become the biggest agency in Madison. We were focused on being the best for a specific kind of client. We moved to slightly larger offices after 6 months, but maintained the warm personal atmosphere that distinguished us from typical corporate agencies. My phone rang as I was reviewing applications for a new strategic position we'd opened. It was Eleanor. Have you seen the Business Journal this morning? She asked without preamble. No, I've been interviewing candidates all day. Why? There's an article about Brightwave. Apparently, they've undergone a strategic restructuring. Cameron Vance is out as managing partner. I set down the application I'd been reading. That's unexpected. There's more, Eleanor continued. They've brought in someone from Chicago to right the ship. A Susan Blackwell. She's quoted saying they're refocusing on core strengths and rebuilding client trust. And in other words, trying to fix the mess Cameron and Olivia created. After we hung up, I found the article online. The strategic restructuring sounded like what it probably was: investors or bank lenders stepping in to salvage what remained of a suddenly struggling agency. The photos showed their once bustling office looking noticeably emptier, with several desks clearly unoccupied. I felt a complex mix of emotions. I hadn't wished for Brightwave's downfall. Many good people still worked there, people who had nothing to do with the decision to push me out. Jessica, my occasional coffee companion, was among them. On impulse, I called her. Jessica, it's Judith. I just read about the changes at Brightwave. Are you all right? There was a pause before she answered. It's been a difficult few weeks. Cameron cleared out his office last Friday. They've let go about a quarter of the staff. I'm sorry to hear that, I said and meant it. Were you affected? Not yet, she replied. But morale is terrible. Everyone's updating their resumes. I thought for a moment. Jessica, we're looking for a junior art director at Silverline. Someone with a fresh perspective and digital skills, but who also appreciates strategic thinking. Would you be interested in interviewing? Her surprise was evident. After everything that happened, you'd still consider hiring me? What happened with Cameron and Olivia wasn't your doing, I said. And I've always believed in your talent. 2 weeks later, Jessica joined Silverline, bringing with her the youthful perspective that complemented our experienced team perfectly. She was the bridge between generations that both agencies had needed all along. The irony wasn't lost on me. Cameron and Olivia had pushed me out in pursuit of youth, driving away the established clients who valued experience. Meanwhile, I'd built an agency that embraced both experience and fresh thinking, attracting both the clients they'd lost and the emerging talents they'd hoped to court. In a moment of reflection, I realized something important. My success wasn't about revenge. It was about authenticity. I hadn't needed to fight against Cameron and Olivia's vision of the future. I simply needed to create something better, something that recognized the value of every stage of professional life, including my own. Sometimes, the most powerful response to being undervalued is simply to build something that reflects your true worth. 1 year after my unceremonious exit from Brightwave, I received an invitation that brought everything full circle. The Madison Business Association wanted to honor me with their Lifetime Achievement Award at their annual gala. As I stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered business leaders of Madison, I saw many familiar faces. Harold Westfield and Victoria Harrington were seated at a front table. Jessica sat with our Silverline team, beaming proudly. Even Patricia had come, despite her general aversion to networking events. In the back corner, I spotted Olivia, now Brightwave's managing partner following the company's restructuring. Our eyes met briefly, and I gave her a small nod, which she returned after a moment's hesitation. When I was asked to leave the company I founded at age 58, I was told that the industry needed a more contemporary image. My wrinkles and gray hair apparently didn't fit the vision my younger partners had for the future. A murmur ran through the audience. I could have fought. I could have sued. I could have made things messy in public, I continued. Instead, I chose to channel my energy into building something new, something that embraced the value of experience while still welcoming fresh perspectives. I gestured to our Silverline table, where our diverse teams sat together. In just 1 year, Silverline Strategies has become one of the fastest-growing agencies in the region, with a client waitlist that now extends to 9 months. We've won multiple industry awards, expanded to 15 employees, and most importantly, we've proven that effective marketing isn't about the age of the marketers. It's about understanding the needs of the clients and their customers. I stopped and looked at Olivia once more. I would want to express my gratitude to my past partners for providing me with the motivation I required to create something that was genuinely true to my principles. The greatest chances might occasionally appear as setbacks. I accepted the award, a stunning crystal sculpture that now stands in Silverline's reception area, to a thundering round of applause. A reminder that outshining those who undervalued you can sometimes be the most effective form of retaliation. Susan Blackwell, the consultant hired to save Brightwave following its strategic reorganization, called me 2 years after I had started Silverline. I'm not sure whether you're aware, she said, but I have been given permission to look into possible Brightwave merger options. Investors believe the business may be more robust if it were a part of another agency. I wasn't totally shocked. Brightwave had never fully recovered from the customer exodus and rebranding catastrophes, even with Olivia's best efforts and Susan's knowledge. And you're calling me because? Despite my suspicion that I already knew the answer, I inquired. Susan answered, Silverline would be an ideal partner. You are aware of the market. Many of our surviving clients have already dealt with you, and your firm has the steady financial foundation that Brightwave does not. The irony was nearly flawless. The very agency I had created in reaction to their ageism was now requesting to save the corporation that had rejected me because I was too old. I responded, I appreciate the call, Susan, with caution. However, Silverline isn't currently seeking to buy out other firms. We're expanding naturally at a rate that preserves our principles and culture. She answered, I understand, in a disappointed but unsurprised tone. If you change your mind, I'll let you know. Even though we both knew I wouldn't, I reassured her. Once the call was over, I sat in my office and gazed out into the garden behind our Victorian home office. 2 team members were brainstorming ideas for a client presentation on our patio as the late afternoon sunshine poured through the trees and created dappled shadows. I took no pleasure in Brightwave's hardships. What I experienced was thankfulness for the path that had gotten me to this point, where I could create something authentically myself, surrounded by individuals who appreciated my unique contributions, flaws and all. I had no intention of seeking retribution when I left Brightwave. I had just refused to believe that I was less important because of my age. I had created a new narrative in the process, one that was not only for myself, but also for everyone who had ever been told they were beyond their best, while they still had their finest job to accomplish.